Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Chris Dorin from RCN Capital. I have a couple of teammates with me too. Ryan Taft in the back in blue, Mitch Zagrodnik in the black. Afterwards, with the networking and whatnot, you guys feel free to stop by, ask us any questions you might have. We see thousands of these transactions every year. I've been in the business for a very long time. I'm myself a little bit. The more you see these things, the easier it is for us to look at these and be able to tell you whether or not it's going to be a good deal pretty quickly. So your lender's always a good resource too, right? You can come to us, you can run a deal by us. If you don't have somebody like Tom, you can get on the phone quick. We'll walk through it with you and show you kind of what the steps are and whether or not this is going to be a profitable deal for you, talk about your strategy options, and really give you a more full slate of, what your potential is for that property. And believe me, a lot of times we're going to tell you, not worth it. A lot of first-time investors, they're probably going to run through 10, 20 properties before they find something that's really good. So for anybody in the room here, I've heard all previous speakers, a lot of good information in there. Big part of this too is just knowing what you don't know and being okay with asking somebody who maybe does have that expertise. And that's what we're talking about when the networking side of things, right? The 5 people you surround yourself with, right? Make those people complementary pieces to what you're good at. And that's a real great way to start out with your team. So a little bit about what we do at RCN Capital. We are a nationwide, direct, private lender. And so what that means is we really specialize in investor mortgages, right? We're here to finance your flip projects, your buy and hold projects, things like that. We even do some ground up projects for development people. We have access to over a dozen different sources of capital. So depending on what your need is, we can do short-term financing, long-term financing, and some stuff in between as well. In ways we're not like a bank. In some ways we share some similarities, right? Most of what we're looking at is going to be more what we refer to as a common sense underwrite, right? We're going to look at your investment strategy. We're going to look at the deal itself. As Tom has mentioned a number of times, right? We want to get into the math of it, right? The math is really where we're going to try to prove out our numbers. And then we're going to also weigh the risk factors associated with it. And the same deal for 2 different people will have different risk levels potentially for us as a lender. And we're going to evaluate that risk, and then we're going to underwrite the loan to that same level of risk. We've done over 20,000 of these transactions, over $5 billion in mortgages originated. RCN Capital started in 2010 coming out of the market collapse. And that's really where you see a lot of private money and hard money space really started to expand. Pre-2008, you weren't going to get a lot of variety of options to choose from when it came to your financing needs. You were limited to very local people. They charged expensive rates and things like that. I started in the conventional world in the mid-2010s. I think it was 2014, 2013. I moved over to the private commercial side where I am now. I can tell you there's a drastic difference in the amount of due diligence that gets done on these files. And there's also a different appetite in the market for these types of investments, right? With the market collapse from the conventional market in 2008, there was a huge spur of foreclosure properties, right? This led to a great revolution in the investor space of fixing and flipping real estate, and then people rehabbing and holding that real estate, right? So a lot of people got into this space, generated a lot of activity. So a lot of money has now flooded into this space, right? Wall Street wants a piece of the action now, right? If there's an investment to be made, Wall Street's going to find a way to make a buck off it. And so that's where a lot of the capital in this space comes from. You also see it come from like insurance funds and things like that as well. But specifically, we're going to again focus on that non-owner occupied real estate. And when it comes to financing needs, as a lender in our space, we're mostly, and most of our competitors as well, we're really focused on that 1 to 4 family investment property. That's kind of a very easy, repeatable, cookie cutter kind of view for us. We'll also do like apartment buildings, mixed use properties and things like that, but you're going to get a lot more prevalence with the 1 to 4 family deals for sure. And the advantage of us being a private commercial lender is we don't have the same regulatory requirements that a bank's going to have, right? So banks dealing with TRID and all the different disclosures and things like that you're going to have. Not so on our side of the fence, but we also have a lot more flexibility with what we can do and what we can't do as far as our ability to say no. If we don't believe in backing the investment property that you have, we're under no obligation to make such a loan. It's still an investment for us as well. And again, we're really going to be focused on the asset itself. We're going to be looking at the loan to value, the borrower's level of experience and credit. It says income on the slide. We don't care about income of the person individually. We care about the property's cash flowing income. So that's what we're referring to when we say income. We will never ask you for your tax returns or your bank or your W-2 or anything like that. We'll get bank statements. We'll verify what the cash flow of the property is. As I mentioned, nationwide lender. There's a couple of states we don't do Alaska, Nevada, North Dakota, Vermont, and South Dakota. Not a lot of activity for those states for the most part, so mostly rural areas are generally not something that private lenders are looking to invest in. That goes to the liquidity of the asset. Rural properties don't have a big population base. There's less demand, less opportunity for appreciation and growth there, so not something that we're looking to finance on the investor side necessarily. And the transactions that we're going to be doing, purchases in rehab, refinances, cash outs. Tom and both Aaron have mentioned, we've done financing deals for those guys as well, both long and short term. And again, these are going to be non-owner occupied real estate pieces in general, right? Nothing we can touch, it can be owner occupied. The second you say it's an owner occupied property, that's a regulatory issue for us, right? You got to be a bank to be really start doing those things. You have to be licensed for that. That's not our bailiwick. We also don't want you to be partially occupying the property. Again, it's got to be true arm's length investments all across the board. And like I said, mostly 1 to 4s, condos, townhomes, what have you, 5+ multifamilies, mixed-use properties. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between what private lending is, what hard money is, right? Tom's thrown around the hard money term. I think our industry would like to prefer that to change over to private money. Hard money is more of a legacy of the pre-2008 era. It's the guy on his couch who had a whole bunch of money. You went to him, you told him about your deal, and he said, fine, I'll give you the money. It's going to cost you 18% in 4 or 5 points. That's expensive money. And if you didn't pay, he was taking that house back. Not so much in the modern era. Private lenders have really softened that up and really professionalized the industry. As I mentioned, we've done over 20,000 transactions. We've got offices nationwide, and we're really looking for those investors who found good markets and a strategy that's going to work for them. And one of the things when you're talking to a private lender that you want to do, if you're brand new to that lender, is like we talked about in the networking, right? Tell us where you've been, what you've done, how you got here, what's special about this investment that made you interested in the first place, and what are you going to do with that property to make it profitable for you, right? Those are the things that will really make the difference for us. Comparatively to a conventional bank, we don't directly compete with conventional banks. Conventional financing is definitely going to be something that if you can qualify for it, it's going to be cheaper, right? They have the lowest subsidized kind of financing you can get. That's universal, right? Most of our players, they're not in the conventional space. And the reasons for that is our deals will move faster. We have less red tape, less document requirements. You're going to see that we're going to be more flexible when it comes to the condition of the property and maybe some other instances of encumbrances upon those properties. And really what we're looking to do there is try to move these things quickly. Now, a good question that was had before when Aaron was up was about, should I be investing as an individual? Should I be investing as an LLC or some other type of entity? I would recommend that you do form an entity of some sort. LLCs are generally the most common ones that we're going to see in our space. The reason for that being is your liability, your risk associated with that, right? There's tax implications as well, but if something goes terribly wrong on a property, so be it. You're bankrupt the LLC, and you're personally, you're still safe, right? So you got to be careful about that stuff too. And that also goes to somebody who's scaling up their business, right? So if Aaron's going to own a couple of rental properties, maybe he's got an LLC, not such a big deal. If Aaron has now 100 rental properties and he's still using one LLC for all of that, well, now all those properties are at risk if something happens in one of those properties, right? So you want to diversify your risk. That's the importance of using entities to really do so. And private lenders like RCN and our competitors, we're all going to be looking for that same level of protection for yourself too, right? It also protects us as lenders from the fact that somebody might say they're doing an investment, but then they actually move in. That creates a bit of a court issue for us when we go through foreclosure process. So most private lenders, they're going to demand or ask that you are definitely investing through an entity of some sort. Massachusetts, you guys like to use trusts as well. Trusts are acceptable as well. A little more complex, but we'll do them. And the problem with trust is just that you can really write a trust to kind of be almost anything that you want it to be. So it really goes to the language of what's in the trust. Hard money is typically what you can refer to as those short-term kind of bridge financing options, right? This is where a lot of the fix and flip money comes in the space. Again, the hard money guys today and the types of loans that we do in that space, a lot less than that 18 and 5 you used to see. I think when I first started in the industry, standard pricing was like 12 and 4. We are, now you're looking at something like 10%, 1 point on a flip deal, a lot cheaper money. And that's because of the amount of competition that's come in the space, the volume of transactions being done, right? The more demand for it, the more competitive the money got. And so that drove down pricing for investors, which is a great thing. I will say in the current market, it's a little bit higher than it was. We've all seen the economic impacts of the last 12 months or so. That does play an impact both on the short-term and long-term markets that we have. So when the Fed is taking their actions against inflation and the bond market reacts, our pricing kind of reacts in the same way. But what you're getting from the hard money lenders is, the access to capital to complete that transaction in the first place. Again, a lot of these are not going to be bank eligible loans. You're also going to be able to move very quickly with these. Basically, appraisal, title, a little bit of paperwork, and we can move and get to closing. Ideally, we'd like to do that in like 2 weeks or less. And again, these are really going to be less regulated asset-based loans, right? So if you don't have the perfect credit score, if you don't have experience, you can still qualify for some of these loans, assuming that you found a deal that's going to work, right? And that's the biggest piece of it. Tom talks about it all the time, but your hardest job is to find the deal. Once you've found the deal, then it's a matter of execution and game plan and who your partners are going to be in that transaction. So a few reasons why conventional financing won't work. Sometimes with the length of time it takes for somebody to close a transaction. As an investor, if you want to make sure that your bid is the winning bid on a property, you have to differentiate yourself sometimes, right? Tom, you're famous. You get real creative with this stuff. Tom will say, well, standard deposit might be $1,000. I'll give you $10,000. Or I'll make sure we close by X deadline. I don't think any of your other folks can do that, right? I'll do this without a contingency, right? No clauses. Now you got to know your property before you're going to say and do those things, and you got to know that you get your financing things lined up and that you can make those deadlines. But Tom puts his money where his mouth is, and he can get an advantage over somebody else. And even if he's offering less for that property than somebody else, that might be a way more attractive offer because you don't know necessarily what the seller's motivations are. So again, take that into consideration. Tom might also be able to point to, hey, I'm an investor who does this all the time. I've got a track record of closing on these deals. If you want a sure thing, I'm more likely to be that guy, right? So differentiating yourselves in how you buy a property doesn't necessarily mean you have the highest bid. You can get creative with the other ways that you're willing to do it. And your bid and your offers there are going to be based on how much research you've done on the math side of it, making sure this is going to be a good investment for you and that you have good surety in that deal. Conventional banks, you're getting a lot more documentation requirements. We're not going to do that to you. We really don't look at anything personal of yours unless you want to send us personal bank statements. Again, we can use personal or business statements for your asset verification. And we don't do any DTI verification, any kind of financial cash flow verification. It's just going to be based on what the property's getting, right? So if you've got rents like Aaron was getting about $2,500 a month and your mortgage payment's about $2,000 a month, great, you get a cash flowing property, we can make that happen. That's the kind of verification we're looking for on the income side. When it comes to process, there's a few things that you want to be. Look at that scenario and say, okay, if you're buying it for about this price range and you're going to put so much money into a project and that's what you're comfortable with, here's what your numbers are going to look like, right? But you want to have an idea of what you're doing with those properties in advance. And that's where that exit strategy comes into place, right? Your exit strategy is going to be, okay, if we're getting a short-term loan to rehab the property, what's next? Are you selling the property? Do you think that's a profitable sale? What are your comps that you're basing that sale on, right? If you're going to be holding it as a rental property, all right, short-term or long-term, is it going to be Airbnb, VRBO? You're going to put a 12-month tenant in place there. What does that look like? What kind of cash flow does that have with it? And what expenses does that come with? Because the expenses for a long-term rental versus an Airbnb property are completely different, right? Your Airbnbs, you got all your cleaning crews and whatnot. It's going to be more frequent. You're going to have higher operating expenses. So again, you have to account for all those things, and those are going to be things that we're looking for as a lender, right? How much research have you guys done into that stuff for yourselves? If you have a financial, pro forma spreadsheet you want to send over, that's awesome, right? I can see your math, and I can start working off of your numbers and understand where you're coming from. And then we'll take what we know about the marketplace and what's happening in there and see if those are realistic numbers or not, or maybe you're a little pie in the sky about things, right? We see that pretty frequently from new investors. They'll come in and say, I think the after repair value is going to be $400,000. And you start looking online and you're like, no. You need to add 1,000 square feet if that's going to happen sometimes, right? And so you want to have numbers that you think are reliable. Don't be emotional about it, right? This should not be an emotional decision. This is a business decision. It should be based on the numbers that you're working with, and they should be realistic, right? If you see 3 comps, but those are the only 3 comps that are selling in that price range, maybe you get there, maybe you don't. But like Tom said, Tom's listing his properties a little bit below market, right? He's trying to get people to come and look and bid it up, right? You're going to do much better if you're in the meaty part of the bell curve there than if you're on the outlier side. Those are the properties that tend to sit on the market. Investors who are waiting to get their final purchase price because that's the number they got to hit. Not a good strategy. You're going to lose more money that way, right? We're also going to be looking at market saturation levels, right? How much is going on in that marketplace? What kind of activity is taking place? What are the trends in that marketplace, right? Are we seeing home price appreciation like we saw over the last couple of years? It almost didn't matter where you were investing the last couple of years. You were going to make money because home prices just kept going up 20%, whatever, right? That makes a big deal on it. And as one of our guys in the office, Tim, likes to say, bad habits are made in good times. And that is very true over the last couple of years. Anybody could have been an investor and done well. Even failed projects could still make money, right? Nowadays, a little less so, right? We got to be more diligent and responsible about the math that we're using to underwrite our files and go forward. So some of the things that we're going to be looking for in that underwriting, right? What type of property is it? What does the appraisal tell us about that property? What does the appraisal tell us about the cash flow of that property? What's your scope of work, that rehab budget that you're doing? Is that looking like it's in line with the appropriate costs, or are you overshooting the mark? Are you under improving, over improving? Have you done research at the other properties in your marketplace to see what it takes to get that price point? Do you have to put in the fancy appliances? Can you get away with something that's a little bit more durable and maybe less expensive because it's more of a rental? Right? These are the considerations you want to make when you're putting that scope of work together. And when you're starting out, these things are, you're living, eating, and breathing these things, right? When you get to the level of some of these guys that we work with who are doing 100 properties a year, things like that, none of that comes with that, right? Those guys send me a budget that's $50,000. I'm doing the kitchen, the bathroom, the roof, the windows, whatever, right? They haven't even been in the house. They just know that house costs that. They're doing volume, right? They've done enough of these things, they can look at them. When you're starting out, though, you have to know all that, right? Mike was talking about that on the attorney side of things. Like, you don't have to know all this stuff in the details, right? Well, the deeper you get into the waters, the more you have to learn that stuff so that once you are of the upper levels, right, it's just built in, right? That's part of the process. That's going to go into the spreadsheets and the calculators you guys use on your own, and you might download from the service, or you might create your own to do some quick, easy math for you to tell you, okay, I'm buying it for this, it's going to rent for that. I should be able to have operating expenses of X, taxes, insurance, Y, Z, etc. Right? You want to be able to put that together so you can plug in some basic numbers, get some math, easy math out, and you'll know, okay, this might have some potential to it, right? That's how you're going to start scaling up your business so that you can look at 1, 2, 3, 20 properties pretty easily without having to go through with a pen and paper and try to figure that all out. Location, condition of the property, always going to be important, right? Location, location, location. Huge factor in where you're investing. But that said, any market can have a deal that's going to work, right? The importance for you as the investor is that you know the market that you're in, right? You know where the price points are. You know where the pain points are. You know that if you cross a certain street, the price value is going to drop significantly, potentially, right? So understand if you're in the right school districts, things like that. Understand the level that the homes are selling at when it comes to the quality of repairs that are being done. Exit strategy, as we mentioned, right? Are you going to be selling that house? If so, what's your data showing us about where your sale is going to end up, right? If you're going to be refinancing the house, what kind of cash flow situation are we looking at? And for the borrower, right, when it comes to income, again, that's property income. Cash reserves, cash is always king, right? If I see an investor who, boy, they're just squeaking by with just enough money to pull off this transaction, we're getting a little nervous, won't lie. You might have a minimum required amount of cash you need to show. If it's really close, that makes us a little nervous, right? Show us as much cash in the bank as you can. Then we'll just go, oh, if something happens here, he's got a cost overrun. This is a person who's going to be able to get through this, weather the storm, no problem, right? Somebody who's really cutting it by the skin of their teeth there. Something sideways happens, which very often on rehab, something will surprise you. You will find out that money gets a little bit tight, and then you're going to friends, family, credit cards, things like that. It can be a little bit awkward, and if you have to go to that family member who told you, I told you it wasn't going to work out. You weren't going to make money. I knew it. Why should I give you money? Experts, yeah. Credit, background, always important, right? Kind of an easy, quick way just to kind of see where we're going to be able to price people out. That's certainly going to play an impact on what kind of interest rate and LTV you're going to get on that. What kind of level of real estate investing experience do you have, right? If you come to us, you tell us you're a first timer, great. That's a different conversation than somebody says, I've got 50 assets already under my belt. I'm looking to do more. We're going to have a different conversation. Doesn't mean we're not going to do the first time, or we absolutely will. We do everybody in between. But it's a different conversation. We want to be able to help you guys get started off on the right foot. And that's not necessarily going to be something that is, hey, I found my property. This is the one, right? Well, let's talk about the one and let's figure that out and make sure it's the right one. And then your business entity, right? Not just that you have one, but who are the people who are making up that entity? And as you think about who you're going to be working with as your partners and different people that you're going to be collaborating with, what roles are those people fulfilling, right? Your operating agreement of your LLC should lay out some of that information for yourselves, right? You and your partners should know who's responsible for what the voting rights and rules are of your entity, etc. How you buy those people out, things like that. Loans we will not fund. So you got owner-occupied property, straight vacant land, no interest for us. Vacant land has potential. It's really hard to put a confident value on vacant land. It's really not that valuable until somebody's got the plan to build something on it and puts the infrastructure to it. So that's a way more long-term play in a lot of cases. That's not really where we're looking to put our money. Contaminated structures. I would be very leery of any property that's got an environmental issue to it. Environmental cleanup's exceptionally expensive. It's a long, boring, drawn-out process. You will deal with a lot of regulators and inspectors for that kind of stuff. Wouldn't recommend doing those. Find something else if you find out a property's got an environmental issue, unless you know for a fact that I have the resources, wherewithal, and know-how to be able to handle that myself, or I've got a guy on my team who does it. Again, be careful with those ones. Sometimes the juice ain't just worth the squeeze, right? If you find an opportunity, though, where you're now getting that thing at a steep discount, maybe you can find a way to make that work. But generally speaking, those are going to be tougher projects. I'd also kind of throw in there historic homes. We can do them. Just, again, you might have an issue that's a little bit harder to get through that process. It might draw out your timeline a little bit more if you have to go through like a historical preservation society to get approvals for your rehabs. I had a guy down in Mystic, Connecticut who spent like 2 years going through one, and the house had a natural lean to it, and they wanted him to keep the lean. Even though it was not necessarily structurally sound the way it was, he had to get creative and find a way to make that happen. And so what they actually did was they straightened the house, and then they built a shell around it that had the lean. That's how stupid that was. So be careful if other people have a say in how your investment goes. Exit strategy, as always, very important, right? And it's okay to have a property, if not even okay, it's better to have a property that you can make money in any different form or fashion on, right? And that's how you do this, right? You buy it right, you can make money on a flip, you can make money as a rental, you can make money as a short-term rental, right? But understand which values that you're going to have for that stuff. So on the short-term basis, popular product for us is really where we had our bread and butter is the after repair value loan. You'll hear ARV get tossed around a lot by investors. This is the flipper's loan, right? Somebody who wants to come in, buy a piece of real estate that's distressed, fix it up, then we'll figure it out, right? On the market sale, or we're going to be renting it out, right? And for the most part, most investors for us are probably going to qualify around 85% of purchase, 100% of rehab. Selected investors, we can get up to 90%. At different times in the market, there's a little bit of a downtime from a lender's perspective, but in better times, standards are probably more like 90. And then for the really high investors who have an exceptional amount of experience, we've even done 100% of the rehab as well. So market cycles will change. And when it comes to your lender options in there, I would be cautious about pigeonholing yourself just to one lender. Products change, their appetites change, their capital sources change, right? You should know a few different people, right? Your network isn't just one-to-one. I have one contractor, I have one attorney, right? You want to have a few different people that you can rely on so that if that person's not available, they don't have the appetite or the time or bandwidth to do that deal, you got somebody else you're already working with and talking to who's got a little bit of a relationship with you. That'll speed up your process a little bit. And again, we're really looking at 1 to 4 family, non-owner occupied real estate here, condos, townhomes, etc. When it comes to real estate, run the property by your finance team first. There will be properties that don't work. So before you make an overcommitment on your contract, let's talk about it. Let's understand the market you're going to be in, what you're playing with. From an after repair value perspective, right now we're going to cap it at about 70% of the ARV. And Tom will have a formula here. I don't know if you're going to share that today. You're going to talk about it, right? All right, perfect. I'll leave that to Tom. Tom will show you how that's going to work on the investor side of things, right? how are you going to figure out what is the price I should be offering for that home? And then after repair value number and 70% is going to come into play for you. Credit score minimum, 620 on this product. That said, you will be shocked if you were in my seat as a lender, how many people in this industry have awesome credit. It's really hard to be an investor and not have good credit, right? Everything becomes more expensive for you, right? Erin's getting credit cards at 0% APR for 24 months. I bet she's got a good credit score, right? It's going to be hard to get that if you're in the 600s. You really want to be 750, 800, right? That's going to get you better deals on those kind of things. And the same thing goes, you put anything on credit as far as materials, supplies, things like that. It's more expensive, right? Those are part of your holding costs. And as an investor, you have to understand all of the costs that are going into your project. It's not just the purchase price. It's not just the financing costs. It's your holding costs, your maintenance, landscaping, snow removal, all of it. So again, experience. We'll do first timers. We'll do people who do 100 a year. That's really just going to be scaled and result in what kind of loan you're going to get at the end of the day and where that pricing is going to be. So if we look at a little just basic scenario here, 100K purchase price, 30K rehab. You got a guy with 700 credit. They've done some flips in the last few years, so they've got some experience here, right? They'll get 85% of the purchase price, so they'll get $85,000 at closing. We'll finance the whole $30,000 in construction, and that's done on a draw basis, right? And so for lenders, the $30,000 in rehab there, we're not just going to hand it to you and say, go get it. You're going to have to show that the work's being done on the property, right? You're going to get the work started. You're going to do your demo, maybe some mechanical work early on. You're going to say, hey, Chris, I need some money from that rehab draw that you got for me. Great. We'll do an inspection, have somebody come out, look at the property, look at your budget. They're going to say, okay, you're 25% of the way done. Great. We're going to send you a wire for 25% of your $30,000, and off you go. You keep that cycle going until you get all the way to the end of your project. And hopefully then it's either on the market or you're going to get it rented out. So as we look at this, we got a 10.25, basically roughly interest rate on that. They had a down payment, $15,000. Its closing cost about $3,000 there. The 10.25 rate probably comes with 1 point on it. So 1 point, we talk about points. Points are just percentages of your total loan amount. So if they're getting a 100K loan, 1 point's $1,000, right? This says the property, we needed it to appraise for at least $165,000. The reason we say it had to appraise for that much is because we got to make sure you're going to make money on this deal. We are not financing any deals that don't show a profit. You can make your own mistakes with your own money. You're not going to do with ours, right? That's going to be a lender's perspective. We'll be very frank with you. This business goes a lot easier and quicker for you if we're direct, right? I don't like to beat around the bush with people. I don't like to overpromise, underdeliver. That's going to set people up for failure. And somebody mentioned it earlier on. I think it was Carla. This business on the investor side is a repeat borrower business. If I fail my borrower and let them go forward with a failing project, they will not be my borrower again. I've lost them because they're probably going to ditch the industry, right? They're going to do something else. I wasn't cut out for real estate. My family told me so. Well, again, check with the experts and the people on your team ahead of time. Let's make sure we've got something good going here and that we're going to be profitable on this deal before we get too far down the road. Click. There we go. We also do multifamily loans, so your 5+ apartment buildings. And again, very similar to what we're doing on the 1 to 4s, slightly more conservative on the LTVs here. But again, we're looking at apartment buildings where, most of these assets that come on the market for sale, they're going to be distressed in some way, right? If somebody's got a big, beautiful, cash-flowing multifamily, odds are they're not selling it unless they have a damn good reason to do so. Otherwise, they'll just hold it. And if they don't want to deal with the headaches, they'll hire a property management company to deal with the headaches, right? So most of these are going to be opportunities that come on the market where the operator has to come in, make improvements, raise rents, get that thing stabilized, and then you get a long-term takeout. And we'll help you guys do that. And then very similar in the qualifications of what we're looking for in this case, but do recognize that these commercial assets that are doing 5 or more units or commercial space to it, there's a tougher level of requirements and code that you're going to have to adopt to when you're making those improvements, right? You're getting into fire safety codes and things like that. So you probably want to have a little bit of expertise on your team before you dip into those waters, right? Again, leverage and pricing on these is going to be a little bit less on the fix and flip side. So instead of 85%, we'll go up to 80% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab. You can also just do a straight bridge loan. You might have one of these properties already, but you might not be eligible for long-term financing just yet, but you need money in the meantime. well, get a bridge loan then. You can still do that. Get some temporary funding until you can season that property, or maybe you got to get more tenants in place before you can get the takeout. That's another option so that you can continue investing while you're waiting for that property to season. And making the assets and the equity that you already have work for you, like Aaron's doing with the Burr method there, that's a great way for you to put as little of your own capital into the deal, less risk for you, and again, use other people's money so that you can keep your own. Because as a real estate investor, right, you still got your own bills to pay. So if you're doing a flip project and that's your only source of income at this point in time, well, you have to be able to weather the storm until that project's completed and sold with your own capital, right? So that's the importance of using other people's money. COVID happens, some other kind of life event happens. Now you're in a different position where suddenly your money is being allocated to other things. So be smart about how you're budgeting these things and what you're going to do if you do have an emergency situation. You need outs. So if we're looking at this one here, this is a 10-unit apartment building sold for $800K, putting $200 into the rehab. Again, somewhat experienced investor here. You'll get 80% of the purchase price, 100% of the rehab cost. Now, on the multifamily, we're going to cap that at 65% of the after repair value, right? A little bit more conservative there. We want you to have that good equity in place. And so 80% of the purchase price will land us with a $640,000 initial advance on the loan. That's what you get at closing. $200K in the rehab holdback. The borrower's down payment in this case will be $160,000. Then we have $35,000 in closing costs. And people say, well, what makes up that closing cost, right? You got your standard closing costs, underwriting and legal fees, things like that. You have points on the deal for origination. You might have appraisal fees, title fees, attorney fees. As we talked about with Mike there at the beginning of the show today, please get title. I'm a lender. We require title on the lender side. You will pay for it in every transaction you do. That's not good enough. You should get the owner's policy 100% of the time. It's a few $100 in most cases. It's just work. It's all the headaches in the world will happen if you don't have your title sorted out. So be safe. It's never worth going cheap there. But that'll all be included on your closing, right? And maybe there might be some taxes due or things like that. Those all be listed on the HUD as well. In this case, this property needs to appraise for a minimum of $1.15 million. That's to make sure, again, that we're hitting that 65% of ARV amount. And again, the borrower is going to front the money up front for any of the repair work. Once we see that work is done, we'll cycle through in the draw process to make sure they get all the way through. So again, capital is very important here, right? Having your own money in reserves is going to help you facilitate the rehab. It's going to help you make the payments on the loan as the progress goes through. And long-term rentals. So this is commonly known as the DSCR product. DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. And that's how people in our space as lenders are going to look at these investment rental properties, right? Debt service coverage ratio is going to be your gross monthly rents divided by your PITIA payment. So pretty straightforward formula there. As a lender, you don't have to figure it out for yourselves. We'll do the math for you. We got spreadsheets for this stuff. It's easy. Basics here. This will be, we're looking at the 1 to 4s here. 30-year fixed rate mortgage, so a product that most people are comfortable with when it comes to their regular home mortgage, right? Very similar. We're still going to escrow for taxes and insurance just like your home mortgage. Those rules are all the same. A couple of differences you're going to have. Rates and pricing will be a little bit different. Our rates are going to be starting at 5.875, and depending on needs and LTV, they'll go up from there. I would say on the high end, we're probably in the higher 7s for those other qualified deals. And loan sizes here anywhere from like $50,000 to $2 million. That'll cover the bulk of real estate in the area here for sure. Boston, you get a little bit higher numbers there potentially. Cash flow could be a problem on some of those bigger ones, so you're going to want to look at that. For the 30-year product, you're going to have different LTV choices. These will max out at 80% of the purchase price. If we're doing a purchase, 80% of the loan to value on a rate and term refi, or 75% in those cash out situations. This will be based on the as-is value or purchase price of the property. And then for this particular type of financing, when you're talking about a stabilized rental property, we're looking for a property that has no repair necessary to it, right? It's got to be in rentable shape. It's got to be livable. You can't have any physical deficiencies to the property. So make sure that before you go forward with this loan, you're checking with your lender, you're confirming that these things are ready to go. I can't tell you how many times we get the appraisal back and I still see the construction crew stuff in there. They're still working on the finishing touches. Now that person's going to claim for a 1004D re-inspection, so save yourself the time. Just make sure it's ready to go before you jump the gun there. And then the last level there we have is the Debt service coverage ratio, we're looking for a ratio of at least 1.1. Lower credit scores will be at 1.2. And so what does that mean? If you have a debt service coverage ratio of 1.0, that means your cash flow is neutral, zero. Your expenses are what your income is, which in general, if we see that, it means you're actually losing money because we're not accounting for every single expense you have. So we're going to say you need to show that you're not only covering the debt, but that you got a little bit on top of it. And the higher that number goes, the better your cash flow is. You got something that hits like a 2 DSCR, you'll be just fine. That's a cash cow. Right, question in the back.
On the cash out refi, on do you have a season period for that?
Yeah, good question on seasoning periods for these properties, right? So if you're doing a conversion from, hey, I bought this property, rehabbed it, I got my tenant in place, I want to get financing long term on this. So you get a few different options there. If you bought the property with financing, 3 months seasoning from date of purchase, my man. If you bought it all cash, we're going to say 6 months. Now, if you're inside that seasoning period, we can still finance it, but your terms might be restricted to a loan to cost. So we might give you 80% of the purchase price paid, plus any renovations that you've done to the property, and we'll have to document that in some form or fashion. So you can still get the loan, but for you to maximize the value based on the new and improved value, you're probably going to want to wait till that seasoning period hits. And that's based on when we close, not when we start the process. So you're also welcome to start the process in month 5 and wait it out until we close to month 6. Then you're seasoned, you're good to go. Good question.
30 days, like,
Take it.
it takes 30 days, so on a cash out.
2-3 weeks. Depends on market and how quick you are getting us stuff and how quick title is to come back, but pretty quick. So it'll be pretty light when it comes to a documentation perspective.
Does an investor have to put up collateral on the property?
The property itself is going to be our collateral. So we're putting an actual mortgage on the property. So if something goes bad with that property, you don't pay us, whatever, we'll go through a foreclosure process and take it back that way, and then we'll have to sell it off to get our money back.
DSCR loan, is it interest only loan?
So you can get an interest-only option with these, but these are generally going to be 30-year fixed-rate mortgages. Most investors are going that route these days. There will be times when the adjustable-rate mortgages are going to be a little bit more attractive. This isn't really that market. There's a slight discount for doing an ARM product, so most of the people we'll talk to are going to be getting a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage in these cases. I will tell you, though, for the industry, these mortgages that we write, 30 years, generally they have some sort of a prepaid penalty on it from like 3 to 5 years, say. You will be shocked, but most of these loans actually pay off in a little less than 4 years. Even with prepayment penalties, even though the fact that they just got financing, say, why would people do that? Home price appreciation, that's why, right? You're sitting on this asset, well, home prices are still rising. Your value is increasing, your equity is increasing. You're also paying down the mortgage at the same time. So you're building more equity, and the market's giving you more equity just based on the natural appreciation that's happening out there, especially over the last couple of years. It was really tremendous. And so people go, hey, I need more money to buy more investment properties. I already have this asset. I can tap into that equity again, refinance, take the cash out, go buy another one, right? That's how you're going to build up that portfolio of passive income that's going to allow for that.
And interest rate depends on what? It says that
Sure.
5.8.
You're generally talking about the rate being dependent upon credit score, loan to value, and cash flow. So if you've got 800 credit score, you'll do better than somebody's got a 700 credit score. But if you're taking lower loan to value, so maybe you're taking a $100,000 loan, but you might qualify for 150, and the property's worth 200. Well, at 50% loan to value instead of 75% loan to value, I can offer you much better rates because my risk is exceptionally low at that point, right? And that's really where lenders are going to scale their loan to value, right? The higher loan to value customers that we're going to give those deals to, 90% of purchase, things like that, those are more people who have a proven track record of doing this before. They can do it again, right? So as a lender, it's less risk for me. I can be more aggressive. For people who I don't have that track record with, maybe they got lower qualifications, if I can still do a deal, I'd like to do it, but it might mean more money out of pocket for that person. Or and even in a bad situation, I'll get my money back. Question.
Sorry. I didn't hear you. Did you say that cash out refi on the multi is there a prepayment on that?
Yeah, you get options on where the prepayments are going to lie. And the longer and more immediate prepayment penalty option you choose, you will actually get better pricing for that. But that's going to be a consideration about how long you're willing to be into that loan, right? So you got options, right? We do like a 3-year prepayment penalty where if you paid off in the first year, it's 3 points in addition to the payoff of the loan. Second year, 2 points. Third year, 1 point. You can do the same thing over 5 years though, where it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So depending on where your comfort level is and what kind of interest rate you're looking for, we can customize that with you. You can choose your option so that if you're a person who says, Chris, I'm only going to be in this loan for 3 years, maybe. All right, well, let's take one of those lesser options where it's not going to be expensive for you to get out of the loan. You'll pay a little bit more in interest rate today, but if you're not sticking in it for 20 years, well, then that's fine, right? Other people might say, this is the last loan I'm ever putting on this property. I just want the cheapest rate I can get. Okay, take the 5-year, 5-point prepayment penalty, move on with your day, and you can set it and forget it, and that'll cash flow, right?
Last question. You guys servicing?
So servicing depends on what type of loan you're taking out. For the fix and flip stuff, we do that in-house. For 30-year, we have a few different vendors we use for that. Nationwide, kind of title escrow and kind of payment servicing there. Yeah.
Does the mortgage fee for the credit, does that affect your company? Is that something that's going to affect you when they start charging that fee?
No, that's going to be more on the conventional side. So for us, generally, if you're looking at private lenders or hard money lenders, a couple of things to know. Understand that most reputable lenders probably aren't going to charge you an application fee up front unless it's just to cover a basic, like a credit and background kind of thing. You might have something like that. But if somebody says to you, like, well, to get started, we're going to need a $5,000 fee from you, talk to a few people before you do that. An upfront deposit might be perfectly reasonable, particularly when you're getting into larger commercial real estate, right? Large commercial real estate, you got a big multifamily or something like that, you got to pay thousands of dollars just for the appraisal. So they might say, yeah, we need a $5,000 deposit up front. Just make sure you understand the terms and conditions of that before you kind of commit to it.
Hey guys, one more question, and then we're gonna let Chris finish his presentation.
We're
He
almost there.
came here with a couple of guys. They're in the back there. Make sure you go say hi to them afterwards as well. All right?
Yeah. We'll be here for networking too. You guys got individual scenarios and questions, we can do that as well. Yeah.
I think I saw as a disqualification, no partial occupancy. So does that mean you wouldn't lend for Airbnb?
No, partial occupancy in that case would be partial owner occupancy. So like if you had a 4-family, the owner can't live in one of the units. Airbnbs we will do. We do those at a little bit lower LTV though. There is a little bit more risk associated with short-term rentals. And we're actually going to underwrite those kind of in a hybrid way when we look at the market rents and what the cash flow is going to be on those. That'll get a little bit into the weeds there.
So just for confirmation, no house hacking.
No, not exactly, no.
We have somebody else who's speaking here talk about that as well. Evelyn and Kelly will do that.
What? House hacking.
We got
House hacking. Yeah.
It's okay. I got you.
That's all right. Different investment strategy.
Different investment
That's a
strategy.
great way to get started out as an investor, though. If you're not, for your first time investment, right? Buy a multifamily, live in one, rent the others, have your mortgage paid for, right? It's a good strategy. Long-term rental basics. So if we have somebody who's got a $400,000 2-family that's coming off a fix and flip, they got 740 credit. The 2 units are combining for about $5,000 a month in rent. We're going to give them a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. You can cash that out up to 75% of the value. So at $400,000, 75% will put you to a $300K loan. And if we assume taxes here at $5,000 a year and insurance at $2,000 a year, that's a property that's going to cash flow for us. This particular scenario, we're looking at about $15,000 in total closing costs. Again, inclusive of points, fees, appraisals, title, etc. And that was a little bit older, but that was a 7.2% rate. Very straightforward. And in this situation, I want to say their payment was like $3,000 something a month when you included the taxes and insurance. So again, nice hefty net cash flow each and every month. Once we've accounted for our rehab costs, that's going to leave us an initial advance of the loan of $403,600, which is 82.4% of the purchase price being advanced to the borrower at closing. This gives them a slightly larger down payment than the 15%. That's because their ARV came in a little bit light. And so when that happens, be prepared. You might have to come out of pocket with a little extra down payment to make that work. So their down payment went up to $86,400 plus closing costs and estimate for title, $18,424, and then the borrower also needed to show reserves of about $34,000. The reason we want to see those reserves, again, can you make the first few monthly payments? Can you get the rehab started off the ground, right? How well cash capitalized are you to pull this off? And again, each month the borrower is going to be making interest-only payments. This is a larger size loan, so that interest-only payment is going to start at $3,600 a month, and it's going to go up from there as they take the rehab money. So again, you want to factor that into your monthly expenses on this project. And by taking the draws, that balance increases, the payments will go up from there. This is a tried and true method of building wealth. And, we go to these conventions and things like that. There's a few of them we go to which are the elite investors in the country, right? People who have owned thousands of units. They've got million, if not billion-dollar portfolios. It's amazing when you get in a room with these people. They'll be in a room like this, and they will just flat out tell you every secret that they have. They don't care. They're telling every competitor of theirs what their secrets are, how they're making the money, what vendors they're using, what software they're using to do it. You know why? They're not in competition with each other. Not a zero-sum game. These people who they're networking with, even though they all kind of do the same thing, it's all very important to them, right? So a good way to start building wealth and getting that capital going for yourself is to understand what your network is, right? We have another saying, your network is your net worth, right? So again, make good friends with these people you're meeting at these networking events, identify what they do and how you can help them and how they can help you, right? You have to be able to offer them something too. So in order to build wealth, we want to have these good cash flowing properties, right? But to get the good cash flowing properties, you can pay full freight for something that's already working, but those aren't likely to be sold, right? Nobody's going to sell you their cash cow. So you're going to have to work for it, right? You're going to be looking for those distressed properties that you can get fixed up, make some improvements, maybe raise the rents, and then you're going to be looking to refinance that transaction and pull cash out. So again, if you guys have questions, you want to run a deal by us, you want to give us a shout, contact information for Ryan and myself over there.